Caroline Levitt stepped onto the set of The View, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere around her. Whoopi Goldberg, seated confidently with her notes and coffee, radiated the assurance of a seasoned host ready to dominate. But what unfolded next would leave the studio and millions watching in stunned silence as one walk-off changed everything. Before we dive into the full story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. If you love gripping tales like this, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we've got another incredible story waiting for you. I could already feel it, the weight of expectation, the hum of controlled chaos, the subtle energy of a room where everyone thought they knew exactly how the next hour would unfold. The studio lights overhead buzzed faintly, their glow casting a warm haze over the stage, where Whoopi Goldberg, legendary talk show host, cultural icon, and master of the televised debate, was comfortably seated. She looked at ease, flipping through her notes with one hand while sipping her coffee with the other. She didn't need those notes. She'd done this before, dozens of times, maybe hundreds, and she thought today would be just another easy victory. I adjusted the mic clip to my blazer, taking in the scene from the green room just off stage. The show's energy was unmistakable. Cameramen making last-minute adjustments, producers murmuring into their headsets, audience members settling into their seats, some already scrolling through their phones. The usual rhythm of a live debate show, but today, that rhythm was going to break. I'd been warned before stepping foot in this building, they're setting you up, Caroline. They want a soundbite, not a conversation. They'll try to cut you off before you can even get a full thought out. I'd heard it all before. I knew exactly how they played this game, and I wasn't here to lose. Across the studio, Melissa Grant and Jonathan Reed, Whoopi's co-hosts, were casually chatting, their body language loose, unbothered. They were comfortable, confident. They'd seen this show before, and in their minds they already knew how it would end. Another conservative guest, another easy takedown, a predictable win. I finished the last sip of my water, exhaled slowly, and set the bottle down. I could feel the tightness of the mic wire against my collarbone, the slight warmth of the stage lights even from where I stood. I smoothed down my blazer, watching as the countdown clock began its slow descent. 10 seconds. 9. The studio lights dimmed slightly. 8. The theme music swelled through the speakers. 7. The audience murmured in anticipation. 6. Whoopi leaned forward, a practiced smile curving at the edges of her lips. 5. The teleprompters flickered to life. 4. I took a slow breath, rolling my shoulders back. 3. Melissa adjusted her posture, already preparing for the first strike. 2. Jonathan smirked slightly, arms folding across his chest. 1. The cameras rolled, and the game began. The moment my name was introduced, I felt it, a ripple through the air, almost imperceptible but undeniable. This was what they'd been waiting for. I stepped onto the stage, keeping my movements smooth, deliberate. My heels clicked softly against the floor as I approached my seat, the hum of the audience settling behind me. Across the table, Whoopi Goldberg leaned in just slightly, the corners of her mouth curling upward in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was ready. She'd done this before, welcoming guests onto her turf, drawing them in, and dismantling them piece by piece before they even realized what was happening. This was her show, her rules, and she thought today would be no different. I slid into my chair, adjusted my mic, and let my gaze sweep over the room. The set was bathed in warm, inviting tones, designed to make the conversation feel casual, organic. But I knew better. This wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. Whoopi wasted no time. "Caroline," she began, her voice smooth, measured, the kind of tone used when delivering a statement that wasn't actually a question. "Let's be honest. Conservative media has been spreading a lot of misinformation. How do you defend that? A calculated attack, broad accusation, immediate pressure, the kind designed to force me into a defensive stance, to make me scramble for footing before the conversation had even begun." The audience responded on cue. A wave of applause, murmurs of agreement. From the corner of my eye, I saw Melissa Grant shift in her seat, crossing her legs with a smirk, while Jonathan Reed leaned back, already looking satisfied. They thought this was going to be easy. I let the noise settle before I responded. I didn't rush. Instead, I tilted my head slightly, letting the silence stretch a fraction longer than was comfortable. Then I smiled. I think the bigger question is, I said, my voice steady, who gets to decide what's misinformation? The room shifted, not visibly, not in a way that could be caught on camera, but I felt it. A few audience members hesitated mid-clap. One of the co-hosts, Melissa, glanced toward Whoopi, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her expression. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Whoopi's smile didn't falter, but I noticed the way her fingers tensed slightly against the table. She scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. We fact-check everything on this show. We don't spread misinformation. I studied her for half a second, then, lightly just enough for the microphone to catch, I said, "Really?" One word, but it was enough. Whoopi's fingers curled against the table just slightly. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it away. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to make the moment sharper. Because I can think of a few examples where that's not exactly true. The shift was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A few people in the audience adjusted in their seats. Melissa's smirk faltered. Jonathan shot a glance toward the control booth. And just like that, the energy in the room changed. Whoopi recovered quickly, letting out a short, sharp laugh as she shook her head. "Oh, please," she said, waving her hand again. "This is exactly what I mean. Conservatives love playing the victim." A few claps. Not as many as before. She noticed. I let her words settle in the air before I leaned back slightly in my chair, my expression unreadable. "That's interesting," I said. She blinked. I kept my tone light, almost conversational. Because, for someone who says conservatives aren't silenced, I paused, "You're getting awfully upset that I'm speaking." The silence that followed wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. Whoopi's lips parted slightly, as if reaching for a response, but for the first time, she hesitated. Melissa shifted. Jonathan's smirk was gone. And I knew right then that I had rewritten the script. The moment stretched, not long enough for the cameras to pick up anything drastic, but I felt it. That small hesitation in Whoopi's reaction, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, the way Melissa's smirk tightened just slightly, how Jonathan straightened in his seat, his arms no longer as relaxed as they'd been moments ago. The audience wasn't laughing the way they were supposed to, and Whoopi knew it. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head with an exaggerated chuckle. "Oh, Caroline," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You act like conservatives are the only ones who ever face pushback." There it was, a recalibration, a strategic pivot. She was trying to frame me as paranoid, deflect from the actual argument, force me onto the defensive. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I folded my hands on the table, tilting my head slightly. "I never said that," I replied, keeping my voice measured. "I said, your version of pushback looks a lot more like shutting people up." Whoopi's jaw twitched. Just for a second, I kept going. "When someone disagrees with you," I said, "they're not just wrong, they're labeled dangerous or misinformed or a threat to democracy." Silence. The audience was listening now. That was the real problem. Whoopi's fingers tapped lightly against the table, a subconscious tell. Melissa's arms were crossed now, her posture no longer as relaxed. Jonathan glanced toward the producers, as if silently asking if they needed to cut to commercial. Whoopi leaned in, eyes narrowing slightly. "Caroline, let's not pretend conservative media hasn't spent years flooding this country with paranoia and propaganda," she said. "The damage your side has done, it's immeasurable." The moral high ground maneuver. The audience clapped, but I noticed something this time. It wasn't as enthusiastic. It wasn't as confident, because the energy of the conversation had changed, and Whoopi wasn't the one controlling it anymore. I let the applause settle, then I smiled. "That's interesting," I said softly. Whoopi blinked. "What's interesting?" I leaned forward slightly. "That you talk about misinformation like it's a one-sided issue." I saw it again, the flicker of hesitation. I pressed in. "You say conservatives spread paranoia," I continued, my voice calm, steady, "but let's talk about the headlines your network has pushed in the last few years." Melissa stiffened. Jonathan suddenly looked very interested in his notepad. Whoopi's jaw tightened. I waited. She let out a short laugh, but it wasn't as strong this time. "Oh, please," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "We fact-check everything on this show. We don't push misinformation." I tilted my head. "You don't?" She forced another chuckle, but I could see the tension creeping into her shoulders. This wasn't going the way she expected. The audience felt it now, too. A few people shifted in their seats. Some exchanged glances. The ones who'd been clapping loudly minutes earlier now seemed hesitant. Whoopi leaned in, voice sharper. "Caroline," she said, "people like you are the reason this country is more divided than ever. You push this fake persecution narrative, playing the victim while your side silences anyone who disagrees." There it was, the desperation creeping in. She wasn't debating anymore, she was attacking. And that meant I was winning. I let the moment stretch, just long enough to let everyone in the room feel it. Then I smiled. "You know, Whoopi," I said, voice light, almost conversational, "for someone who says conservatives aren't silenced," I paused, "you sure seem upset that I'm speaking." Boom. The entire room shifted. Whoopi exhaled through her nose, her fingers curling slightly against the table. "Oh, come on," she muttered. But she wasn't laughing anymore. And neither was anyone else. Jonathan cleared his throat, finally stepping in. "I think what Whoopi's getting at," he said, forcing a chuckle, "is that there's a difference between disagreement and—" I turned my gaze toward him. "You mean between disagreement and being shut down?" I interrupted smoothly. He blinked. I tilted my head. "Tell me, Jonathan," I said, "when was the last time someone sat in this chair and challenged your views without being talked over?" Silence. Real silence. Not the kind that signals a commercial break, not the kind that means the conversation is moving to another topic, the kind that cracks foundations. Melissa shifted. Jonathan said nothing. Whoopi was staring at me now, her expression carefully blank. I leaned back in my seat, watching them, waiting. Then, just loud enough for the microphones to pick up, I said, "That's what I thought." Whoopi exhaled sharply. "Oh, please," she scoffed, shaking her head. "This isn't about silencing anyone. It's about accountability." "Is it?" I asked. Her mouth opened, but I kept going. "Because it seems to me," I said, my voice light but pointed, "that what really bothers you isn't misinformation." I let the words stretch. "It's opposition." And that was it. That was the moment. The moment Whoopi realized she'd lost control of the conversation, the moment Melissa stopped trying to jump in, the moment Jonathan's confidence cracked just slightly, the audience dead silent. Because the thing about live debates is that you can spin the aftermath, reframe the headlines, cherry-pick the sound bites, control the narrative after the fact. But in the moment, in real time, the truth is impossible to hide. And the truth was, Whoopi Goldberg, the woman who'd spent years dictating the terms of every debate on this show, had just lost control of her own stage. She could feel it, I could see it, and she hated it. She rolled her shoulders back, exhaling slowly. "Caroline," she said, forcing a smile, "you can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, facts are facts." I smiled. "They are." Then I leaned in, my voice calm, controlled. "So, let's talk about them." Whoopi's fingers curled against the table. Melissa wasn't smirking anymore. Jonathan was watching the producers now, waiting for a signal, any signal, to save them from this disaster. But there was no saving this moment, because the power had already shifted, and for the first time in a very long time, Whoopi Goldberg was not in control anymore. Her fingers curled tighter against the table, her carefully constructed composure beginning to fracture. She wasn't used to this, not here, not on her stage. She'd spent years controlling conversations, steering debates, cutting off guests before they could gather momentum. And now, the moment wasn't hers anymore. I could see it, the way her shoulders tensed, the tightening of her jaw, the glance toward the producers as if silently asking if they could cut to commercial. But they couldn't. Not yet, because I wasn't finished. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Caroline," she said, her voice laced with forced patience, "this isn't about shutting anyone up. It's about facts." I tilted my head slightly. "Is it?" A flicker of hesitation, barely there, but I caught it. I leaned forward just slightly, lowering my voice just enough to pull the entire room in. "Tell me something, Whoopi," I said, my tone even, unbothered. "When was the last time a conservative sat at this table and wasn't interrupted, mocked, or labeled a threat to democracy?" Silence. Not immediate, but growing. I watched as the words settled over the room, as audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as even Melissa and Jonathan exchanged uncertain glances. They knew what I was doing, and they also knew I wasn't wrong. Whoopi exhaled through her nose, shaking her head as she forced out another chuckle. "Oh, please," she muttered. "That's not how this works." But no one laughed. The audience, her audience, wasn't reacting the way they usually did, and she could feel it. The moment was slipping from her grasp, and it was happening in real time on live television, where no amount of post-production edits or media spin could fix it. Melissa tried to step in. "I think what Whoopi is saying—" I didn't let her finish. I turned my gaze toward her, my expression unreadable. "Melissa," I said, my voice still calm, "do you think this show has treated conservative guests fairly?" She froze. That half-second of hesitation was all I needed. I tilted my head slightly. Yes or no? She swallowed, opened her mouth, closed it again. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. And in that moment, the shift was undeniable. The audience could see it. The co-hosts could feel it. And Whoopi was watching everything unravel. I turned back to her. "You keep talking about accountability," I said, "so let's talk about it." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "You say conservatives aren't silenced. You say this show allows real discussions." I leaned in slightly. "So why does it feel like the second someone challenges you, they're met with ridicule instead of debate?" A long, heavy silence. Whoopi's fingers tensed against the table. Melissa's face was unreadable. Jonathan's smirk gone. The audience still waiting, because this wasn't just another debate anymore. This was something else. A reckoning. Whoopi finally exhaled, her patience wearing thin. "Oh, give me a break," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You're just mad that conservatives are being called out for their lies." There it was, a shift from control to defensiveness, an emotional reaction rather than a measured response. She knew it, I knew it, and the audience definitely knew it. I stayed still for a second, letting her words settle. Then I smiled. "Called out?" I echoed lightly. I let the question sit in the air. Then, with deliberate precision, I leaned in slightly and delivered the next blow. "No, Whoopi," I said. "What conservatives don't like," I paused, then finished, "is being shouted down, talked over, and labeled as dangerous just for having an opinion that doesn't align with yours." Boom! Whoopi's face froze. The audience sucked in a breath. Melissa and Jonathan glanced at each other, unsure whether to step in or let the disaster unfold. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every guest who'd ever been set up, every conversation that'd been manipulated, every narrative that'd been carefully crafted to ensure only one side ever looked right. And now, for the first time, the audience was seeing through it. Whoopi exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Oh, please," she muttered again, her voice lower, less sure. "This is ridiculous." But she didn't offer a counter-argument, because there wasn't one. I could see it now, the way her mind was racing, the way she was trying to calculate how to recover. But there was no way to recover from this, because the damage had already been done. I leaned back slightly, tilting my head. "Tell me, Whoopi," I said, my voice light, almost amused. "When was the last time someone sat at this table and actually finished a sentence without being interrupted?" She froze for just half a second, but it was enough. Because that moment, that hesitation, was the final crack. And then, the entire illusion shattered. The audience wasn't laughing, the co-hosts weren't backing her up. And Whoopi was staring at me. Her fingers curled against the table, realizing in real time that she'd lost control of her own show. She inhaled sharply, exhaled, then she did something no one expected. She reached for her mic, pulled it off, and stood up. The audience gasped. She turned to the producers, muttered something under her breath, and then, without another word, she walked off set. I didn't move, I didn't smirk, I didn't celebrate, I just sat there, watching as the weight of what had just happened settled over the entire studio, watching as Melissa and Jonathan exchanged panicked glances, scrambling to salvage the moment. But it was too late, because the moment Whoopi walked off, I knew this wasn't just a segment anymore. This was an event, and the fallout, it had already begun. For the first time in years, Whoopi Goldberg had nothing to say. The moment stretched, thick, suffocating. The audience was frozen. The co-hosts weren't moving. Even the camera operators hesitated, unsure of what to focus on, because no one had expected this. Whoopi had walked off her own show. I watched as she disappeared off stage, her microphone still lying on the table where she'd left it. Melissa Grant and Jonathan Reed, her loyal co-hosts, were stunned. Jonathan was the first to react. He coughed, forced a laugh, then glanced toward the producers as if silently asking, "What now?" Melissa, still gripping her cue cards, cleared her throat and attempted to smile. "Well," she said, her voice thinner than before, "that was unexpected." A weak chuckle from a few audience members. The damage control had begun, but it was already too late. I adjusted my mic slightly, crossing my hands on the table. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. And the internet was already detonating. The internet reacts before the producers could even cut to commercial. Before anyone could try to control the fallout, the clip had already spread. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. Within 7 minutes, it was the #1 trending video in the country. Hashtags exploded. Whoopi storms out. Caroline unfiltered. Whoopi can't debate. The reaction was instant. She just proved Caroline's point. She ran the second she lost control. This wasn't just a debate. This was the media getting exposed in real time. Even longtime fans of the show were shaken. If Whoopi had a real argument, she wouldn't have left. Period. Fox News, The Daily Wire, and Newsmax ran the footage on a loop, calling it The View's biggest meltdown ever. CNN and MSNBC tried to downplay it, calling it just a heated moment, but the internet wasn't buying it, because the footage didn't lie. No amount of PR spin could change the fact that millions had just watched it happen with their own eyes, and Whoopi hadn't been seen on air since. The aftermath. The network executives were furious. Sponsors were nervous. Leaks from inside ABC revealed panic behind the scenes. One producer, speaking anonymously, admitted the critical mistake. "We thought Caroline would be an easy guest. We underestimated her completely, and now we're paying for it." The damage was already spreading. A few high-profile advertisers began quietly pulling out. The show's social media team went silent, and then came the real problem, the memes. The meme storm began within 12 hours. Whoopi's face had been turned into a meme on every major platform. When you realize you walked into a trap, captioned over a freeze frame of her stunned expression. Whoopi, after inviting a conservative thinking it'd be an easy win over a gif of her walking off set. Late-night hosts piled on. Jimmy Fallon played the clip, joking, "I haven't seen someone walk off a set that fast since my ex found my Tinder profile still active." TikTok comedians reenacted the meltdown, racking up millions of views. But the biggest blow, it didn't come from Whoopi. It didn't come from the network. It came from me. The tweet that broke the internet. I didn't rant. I didn't fight back. I didn't need to. I simply retweeted the viral clip with one line. I thought this was a debate. The internet detonated. Millions of likes, hundreds of thousands of shares, news anchors quoting it live on air. That single tweet did more damage than any of Whoopi's defenders could undo. Because it was short, it was calm, and it was devastating. I didn't need to attack Whoopi personally. I just let the moment speak for itself. And that's what made it so much worse for her. Because while The View was scrambling to rewrite the narrative, I was already moving on. The network scrambles. By the following morning, ABC's damage control machine was in full swing. They issued a formal statement, hoping to regain control of the narrative. Our program has always welcomed diverse perspectives. However, yesterday's discussion became more heated than anticipated. But no one was buying it. Because the raw footage was everywhere. It couldn't be spun. It couldn't be reframed. Millions had already seen what happened with their own eyes. And the network's attempts to soften the disaster, they only made it worse. The final blow. Meanwhile, conservative media didn't let up. Fox News aired the clip on a loop with the headline, "Whoopi Goldberg storms off The View after Caroline Levitt calls out hypocrisy." The Daily Wire followed up with, "Watch Whoopi can't handle Caroline's facts, throws tantrum on Live TV." Newsmax even brought in a body language expert to analyze Whoopi's meltdown. This wasn't just frustration, they explained. This was someone realizing in real time that she was losing and needing an escape. For the next 24 hours, the clip was replayed everywhere, dissected frame by frame, with analysts breaking down every shift in Whoopi's expression. And just as expected, the mainstream media tried to fight back. CNN dismissed it as a contentious moment taken out of context. MSNBC defended Whoopi, claiming she was taking a stand against misinformation. The Washington Post ran an op-ed attacking me, insisting my comments were designed to provoke emotion, not engage in real discussion. But none of it worked, because every time they tried to spin it, people just went back to the original clip and saw the truth. The end of an era. Within a week, the clip had over 35 million views. And Whoopi? She hadn't been seen on air since. Internal reports surfaced revealing that network executives were deeply disappointed in how she'd handled the situation. Then came the real problem. Sponsors were pulling out. The network was bleeding money. One high-ranking manager was overheard in a closed-door meeting. "We need a recovery plan immediately. We cannot let Whoopi lose control like that again." They needed her back. They needed her to fix this. But there was one problem. Whoopi refused. She avoided discussing the incident entirely in the days that followed. No statements, no damage control, nothing. Because deep down, she knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't just a slip-up. This wasn't just an awkward exit. This was a moment that shattered the illusion. Because when it mattered most, it wasn't me who walked away. It wasn't me who refused to engage. It was Whoopi. And no matter what they did next, no matter how hard they tried to rewrite the story, no matter how much damage control ABC attempted, they would never be able to erase it. This story leaves us with a powerful lesson. Control is an illusion when truth and resilience take the stage. Whoopi's unraveling wasn't just about losing a debate. It was about underestimating the strength of an opposing voice and the consequences of silencing rather than engaging. In life, we often face moments where we're tempted to shut down what challenges us, whether it's a differing opinion, a tough conversation, or an uncomfortable truth. But real strength lies in listening, responding, and standing firm without crumbling. Caroline's calm persistence teaches us that staying composed under pressure can shift the narrative more than any outburst ever could. Apply this daily. Face disagreements with clarity, not defensiveness, and let your actions speak louder than chaos. Thanks for joining me in this story. What's your takeaway? Drop a comment below, like and subscribe to love to hear how you'd handle a moment like this.